Okay.
Yeah, Oksana, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's been a long several months that we have not met, but today Samantha and Kimberly will discuss the next phase of the residential uptown area and industrial. So take it away, Kimberly.
All right, and sorry, I disappeared for 1 second. I moved too fast when the
Okay.
recording button came up and I hit leave instead of
Okay.
fine, but
You're
I'm
okay.
back. Okay, so I don't know, Doug, if it's you or Oksana, maybe it's Oksana. Could you allow me to share? Oh, perfect. Whoever jumped ahead and did that. Okay, so we wanted to just walk through, kind of recap, I think, for everyone, right? So it's been a while since we met, probably 4 months since we last met on this with, some of the form-based code finalization, taking precedence. I want to just give kind of a quick recap of where we left off, some of the changes that have been made per discussion at our last meeting back in June. And then, we will be sending the actual draft documents out. Oksana has those. We can update them based on any discussion today, but then are hoping folks over the next week or two can take a more detailed look at the actual zoning documents and provide any written comments to us. And then if we can kind of keep momentum going and meet again in early November to kind of review those written comments, I think we should be in a pretty good place to try and get these wrapped up. Maybe not fully adopted given kind of timeframes and things, but fully wrapped up by the end of this calendar year and at least started on the adoption process. So just quickly wanted to touch on form-based code updates and then again, recap the 2 additional districts that we're looking at and then wrap up with discussion of next steps. So the form-based code was formally adopted. We are currently working on and we'll have for Shauna today a draft checklist. So we are preparing a review checklist and an applicant checklist just to help people utilize and understand how to go through the form-based code and understand if they're meeting all of the requirements, the design requirements that are specified. And then in addition, still working with Shauna to identify and schedule a training session for the form-based code with the town board and the planning board and ZBA, just to make sure everyone is very clear on process associated with any new projects that come into the form-based code district and how to work through them. Any questions on that before I jump ahead to the mixed residential? Okay. So again, the mixed residential district, just as a reminder, and is this yellow area shown on the maps here. And then when we do talk about the industrial overlay, that will apply to the blue area indicated on this map. So just keeping that in mind as a reference point. So again, the mixed residential district, we really built on the town's existing multiple residence district. So because that already had a strong base, it has a very similar use and design intent. So it was used as the baseline with some tweaking and modification for the purposes of developing the zoning standards. So from a permitted use perspective, just as a reminder, the multiple residence district that currently exists allows for townhouses, apartment buildings, and 2-family dwelling unit structures. We have added single family to the list of permitted uses within this district. We have also going back to the Uptown Master Plan and thinking about this area as really a transitional area to more intense commercial locations within Uptown. So this is something we did discuss at the last meeting in June, if everyone recalls, allowing for the integration of some small scale commercial as part of the mixed residential district. But while we had originally identified these as permitted uses based on our discussion at the June meeting, we have changed this to uses that would require special permit approval process. So we also added, per discussion, religious institutions to the list of special permitted uses within this area. Prohibited uses would include drive-through establishments, although anything not explicitly listed in the permitted or special permitted uses would be prohibited. We did feel it was important to explicitly call out that in association with any of those retail or commercial uses, drive-throughs are explicitly not allowed within this area. Other changes that have been made that are reflected within the current zoning language, and again, per discussions we had at our June meeting, we did add a requirement for outdoor amenity spaces associated with any new projects. We did add a requirement for bicycle parking, and that should say 1 bike parking space for every 12 vehicular parking spaces, not 12 feet. Added a requirement for sidewalk connectivity, increased the maximum height of apartment buildings to 45, added a maximum of 1,000 square feet for all commercial uses. So again, ensuring commercial uses were of a small neighborhood character, and then added definitions for personal service commercial and retail commercial uses, which would be added to the definition section of the full zoning code. Because just as a reminder, unlike the form-based code, which is a standalone document, this section will get incorporated into the town's existing zoning code. It will not be a standalone document. And that is kind of a synopsis of where we landed with regards to the mixed residential district. And I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything. Again, once everyone, and I'm not sure, we just sent it to Oksana this morning. I'm not sure if it's gotten out to everyone yet, but once you are obviously able to get into more of the detailed nuances of the actual zoning language, there might be other questions that pop up or other things that you feel we need to address as part of this district.
Kimberly, could you just show us the map again, please?
Sure, and this does not address all of the most recent little tweaks that we made as part of the recent form-based code map changes. So there are a couple, and maybe if you want to we can share the most updated map if you think that would be helpful. Doug, I can kind of stop sharing this and get up the newer map. It's just a couple of parcels, but and largely, here, let me pull that up. And Sam, I don't know, do you have that handy? If not, I can pull it up on my computer.
Just to confirm, we're talking about the yellow area, not the orange area, correct?
Correct. So the red and the orange are the two form-based code areas. So those are both already addressed in the recently adopted form-based code. And this just is that brighter yellow area. So let me just pull that back up.
I have it right here, Kimberly. I can.
Thanks, sorry.
I just got it too.
Okay.
Oh, so that one doesn't show actually this yellow. So this is all the area that's excluded from the mixed residential.
So you're talking about, Kimberly, I'm lost. You're talking about the stuff we just adopted?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was referring to a different map that showed the revised boundaries of this. I can
Okay.
just point out the
Okay.
changes on this map. Oh, sorry, I didn't share it before I pulled it up. So I believe we added, did we end up adding this parcel, I believe, to the form-based code?
Yes, Kimberly, that large parcel got
This
added
one.
to the
Yep.
mixed-use development sub-area.
Yes. So this would not be included in the yellow area, but all of this remains the same. These parcels and these parcels back here.
Okay, so we're not talking about form-based code. We're talking about just generic code changes
A
to these
new-
areas.
Yeah, so essentially this is a new district. So within the existing code, there's a series of districts. This yellow is the creation of a new district referred to as the mixed residential district. And essentially this new district is just some minor tweaks to the existing multiple residence district that already exists in your code. And it's just opening up the flexibility for these areas in yellow to allow for single family development, which is currently not permitted in the multiple residence district, and allowing for some small scale personal service, neighborhood commercial oriented uses that could be incorporated as part of residential development, or just on a small parcel, having kind of an integrated small scale commercial that really is intended to help support and provide services to surrounding residential development.
Can I ask, do we address manufactured homes at all in this area?
So manufactured homes would technically be permitted as long as, if it's a single family manufactured home. And I'm assuming you're just referring to a home that's made offsite, we don't discern that right now, I guess is the short answer. So technically, yes, a manufactured home could be permitted.
I'm referring to manufactured homes in like a park, for example. So like a manufactured home development, is that addressed at all with the zoning here? Is that permitted, encouraged, or where are we in that for this area?
Are you referring more to like a mobile home park?
Yes.
So a mobile home park would be different than a manufactured home.
So I guess, think of like Purdy Road, for example, that sort of situation. I don't know what we would refer to that as. I generally think of
I think
them
it
as
would be a park.
manufactured home parks is what I would call
It'd
them.
be a
typically,
park.
but-
But yeah, it's two different things. There's mobile home parks and there's standalone.
Manufactured homes.
Yeah,
Yeah. We do not explicitly say mobile home parks or are either allowed or disallowed. So if you feel, and I don't know what the sentiment is, if you feel strongly one way or another, we can certainly add language in here to clarify that. But like an individual manufactured home, a single family manufactured home that's essentially manufactured and brought to
Yeah.
a site would be allowed.
Yeah.
Just based on the permitted uses.
Anybody
Well,
have
what
any
does
thoughts on it?
everyone- Well, that's what I was just going to ask. What is everyone thinking?
Well,
I mean, we don't
let's-
have,
Yeah, I
We
was
don't
just going to
have
say it
any
also has to
mobile
do with
homes.
how they're set. Kimberly started to allude to that. So, New York State Building Code also defines, like, for instance, if it's a ground set, for instance. So, what Adeline is talking about with Purdy Road, more of the traditional mobile home park, right? It's set on piers, and a lot of times there's skirting that covers, that's what you would see in that area off of Purdy Road versus a ground set manufactured home that is set on either a concrete foundation, block wall foundation. Those traditionally are single family homes. So it has to do with that too. So just keep that in mind as you're having the discussion about kind of what you're looking for.
So can you, I hear what Doug is saying, and in Western states, there are communities of manufactured homes, trailers set on cement base. And there are communities of those that are considered affordable communities. Is something like this allowed in this area?
It's not explicitly disallowed. So if we want to explicitly not allow it, we should add language to that end.
I know one of the ideas that's been brought forth so far for that area was, what's the guy's name, Doug? Mr. Cook from, I think, the Rochester area, that was talking about houses would be more modular in construction as opposed to metal sided trailer park type lodging that we've all seen in the past. Manufactured and modular and all these terms, have specific definitions. But from what I've seen so far that's been proposed in that area is some kind of modular construction, which is, a house that would be constructed in pieces in a factory, if you will, and then brought and assembled on site.
I
Yeah.
think modular construction homes are pretty common in our area. I'm just wondering how people feel about the concept of houses without a foundation or a slab in that area, basically.
I mean, I guess personally, it wouldn't be my favorite, but I wouldn't want to cross it off either. I would just assume the board would look at, based on the presentation, if it made sense at that time and move forward with that, something like that or not. I guess my thought is no, but I can't promise in 5 or 6 years, maybe it'll look pretty good somewhere there. I don't know.
I think from the conversations that I've been involved in, the idea for this area is to not have something like what we have on Route 364, down toward the town line, but rather some kind of more, modern modular construction that's affixed to a base that is in ground rather than something that is on a frame that could be transported away.
Terry, is the development the Cooks are building that you're talking about, that's not in this yellow area? I think that's in the orange area, correct?
Oh, is it?
Miscuse sub area? I'm not
Sub
entirely
area.
certain. I thought it was in the Emerson, north of Emerson Road there, but I don't, maybe someone could clarify.
Yeah, so two things. The development that Terry's talking about, those are ground set. Those are going on concrete block walls. So those are not, those are manufactured modular homes that are going to be ground set. And they are in the form-based mixed-use sub area, the orange
Okay.
area, not in the yellow area. I guess my question for you guys as you're having this conversation, really, it comes down to think of something like Gypsum Mills in Victor, right? Which is a manufactured affordable housing type of a development, but those are not ground set manufactured homes. Those are on piers with that skirting. Do you want to allow something like that in the yellow area that Kimberly's talking about?
I don't think we should disallow it.
No,
I kind of agree with Terry that ground-based modular homes are frankly, they're the thing of the future. You know, they're where the homes are being built in factories and transported to the site almost fully enclosed. And they're looking at newer technologies to keep creating these types of things. I don't think we should eliminate homes on piers with skirting, but I frankly don't think they should be mentioned.
I agree.
Yep, I agree, Karen.
Yep, this is Cal. I agree too, and I agree with what Charlie said as well.
I
Okay.
agree also.
So it sounds like we can leave the language as is and not explicitly call it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, any other questions on the mixed residential? And again, recognizing you'll all kind of take a deeper dive into the draft over the next couple of weeks. Okay, so for the industrial and business park district overlay, and again, so these apply to the blue and the purple areas on this map. And this does not change the underlying zoning district. So the existing underlying zoning district stays the same. The design guidelines become another layer on top of the underlying zoning district. And again, we've organized the guidelines based with, a purpose, an intent statement, the boundaries which specify. So for example, this blue industrial area within the Uptown District, the guidelines only apply within this area. So you have other industrial zone lands within the town. These guidelines don't apply to those parcels that are zoned industrial. They only apply to parcels zoned industrial within our Uptown area. So that is clarified as part of the interpretation of the boundaries. And then we do have a series of guidelines focused on building and site design guidelines. And maybe before I get too far away from the map, are there any questions on kind of the boundary or the area that we're focusing on with these? Or how it's organized as another layer on top of the underlying zoning requirements?
So Kimberly, can I ask a question about that? The square parcel to the north of Airport Road is the school bus garage there. That's already zoned industrial. And the parcel just to the north of that surrounds that is also zoned industrial. So I see it's not in the overlay, and the proposed mixed residential piece is on those parcels. I guess my question is twofold. The mixed residential piece, does that rezone from the base zoning, and then the overlay, should that be extended to include that area?
So as of now, based on this initial proposed zoning, those two parcels that you just mentioned would get rezoned to mixed residential. And this overlay would not apply because they would be rezoned. If you feel they should stay industrial, we can change that on the map to blue, and then these guidelines would apply to those parcels.
I think we should reconsider that these should be industrial, the parcels that Doug is pointing out. I mean, really, if you look at what's already developed there, we don't have a whole bunch of room to expand industrial in that area.
I agree, Andy.
Doug, where is that question that came a couple of weeks ago from GRE regarding the thing that was called the Kent project?
Yeah,
Which of those
so
lots are involved in that?
so it's the two that I just mentioned as well as the two to the north of that. And that's where I'm wondering if we should build in some flexibility here that
Yeah,
Kimberly, maybe I don't know if there's a way, and I don't know how you show it, but maybe you do consider changing the base zoning, but extend the overlay to give the option to the area. We do have very limited amount of industrial land in the town of Canandaigua. That's what I know exactly what Andy was talking about. And so when we get notification about some opportunities, we're really limited because of a limited amount of industrial land that has already the infrastructure capable to support industry. This area already has rail. This area already has water and sewer and some of the things that we need, and it has the natural gas, and it's obviously very close to the airport. Whereas some of the other portions of the town of Canandaigua, like County Road 10, they don't necessarily have that's zoned industrial, doesn't already have those infrastructure pieces.
yeah.
Okay, yep. So if we did extend the blue, the industrial, well, it's already industrial, so represented what's existing, then the overlay would apply to anything within this boundary that's zoned industrial. So we can make that modification.
Okay.
Okay, yeah,
Is there any kind of a buffer that can be created between that and there's a lot of houses and single family homes along Thomas Road there, is my only concern. I agree we need more industrial land, but typically you've got something more commercial in between industrial and residential, and that Thomas Road is heavy residential right now.
And there are landscape and buffer requirements as part of the underlying district, and then additional as part of the overlay.
Right. So I'm going to go back to exactly the point that Adeline just raised. So the heaviest density on Thomas Road is actually on the north side of Thomas Road, but there are houses on the south side intermixed there on the south side of Thomas Road. And then you have those two parcels, those two larger parcels that are also adjacent to Thomas Road, and then they also connect onto Brickyard Road. But it's my understanding from working with the developer, there's some serious challenges to the development of those parcels for residential, being a gas line that goes through that area, as well as they're at a low point. So it would be to construct even sewer, for instance, to extend mixed residential in that area becomes challenging in putting in pump stations and those sorts of things. And I wonder if a higher and better use for those two parcels would be some sort of industrial with some sort of buffering for those existing residential pieces there, Kimberly. I know that's a little different, probably tack than where we were last time, but we were looking at those parcels just recently for all that.
Could you just clarify what the project is? I'm not familiar with the Kent project.
We get notifications from Greater Rochester Enterprise about economic development opportunities, and this would be a possible manufacturing industrial opportunity.
But specifically what it is, we do not know.
Is it possible to split a parcel into two designations? In other words, if we came off of Thomas Road a certain number of feet on those two larger parcels, and maybe that's mixed residential, and then the balance of the parcel, south end of that parcels would be industrial.
It's technically legal and possible. It's something I strongly discourage, just because I think it does it can create some headaches down the road to split parcels into, especially to such different zoning districts. But technically the answer is yes, you can, if that's the direction you'd like to go in.
It's just a thought, because I know there's some parcels along Route 332 that are zoned commercial on the frontage and agricultural on the backside.
Yeah. Yep. And you could just kind of continue a line not even in half, but maybe just following the existing. Is that something you'd like us to take a look at, what that could look like?
Sure.
I don't feel as strongly about that as the other two initial parcels we mentioned. I think those definitely should be back to industrial or remain industrial. And I just threw that out there as an option on the other two for discussion.
Anyone else have thoughts on that? Those parcels that above the,
Charlie Parkhurst has his hand up.
I don't know if I do. I don't, I think Andy has a pretty good expertise on that, so I really don't want to go against him. Just because he's the best one we got as far as these type of conversations, and if that's what he thinks, I would tend to defer to him. Especially if there's something that might be coming, you'd hate to say no to it because we didn't zone it for that.
Yeah, Charlie, but the interesting thing about this particular offer or opportunity is the amount of land available. And I believe that we need to keep that amount of land available for economic opportunities that might come through different economic boards.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a unique property to Canandaigua, I guess is what makes it kind of a hot commodity for this conversation, because not a lot of spots like it like that. I guess probably the more options we leave ourselves, the better off we'll be. Although to Kim's point, it could be a complete pain. 4 years from now, we might be regretting it, but I think the more flexibility we have, the better off we'll be as it stands today.
Yep, I would agree.
I do like Doug's suggestion about a buffering area between the parcels.
okay, so we can prepare 2 updated versions, one that just converts these parcels back to industrial, and one that looks at a potential line splitting these 2 additional parcels as well.
So are you talking about the back of those parcels being industrial and the front of those parcels being the yellow mixed use residential?
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like I have less of an issue with the square parcel and the one surrounding it becoming industrial, but that would really, you're talking about industrial literally backing up even with buffering to someone's backyard in an area that has been nowhere near industrial. I would recommend that we at least contact the residents about that before that's some change that we make.
They're not going to love the idea for sure.
And I honestly don't think we should do anything that is strongly negatively impacting tax-paying residents. I mean, that's a little tight to me. I would not be happy to have an industrial corridor go from miles away to directly on my backyard.
Well, at the very least, maybe we take the frontage on Brickyard at the corner of Thomas and maybe make that industrial.
I mean, potentially, I really would advise against, even with buffering and even with what Doug had indicated, that there was some sort of low spot or something back there. I would really not be happy. If I lived in one of those houses, I would not be happy with an industrial design going to my backyard line, so.
This piece does end up being landlocked as well, if you were to take the back half of this and make it industrial.
I mean, just to make sure my dial's not off, that's kind of the area behind Farnsworth, correct?
Yeah.
Sort of.
So, I mean, it's kind of an open, vast land to begin with. I know there are some houses, you've got the development around Center Point, you've got some standalone houses.
It's behind like the veterinarian. The veterinarian's that corner of Thomas Road and Summers Drive.
Yeah,
And then Brickyard Road, that's the airport on the other side of Brickyard. there.
Right. I mean, it's not like it's, I don't know, that's already got some industrial stuff going on around it anyway, so that's why I don't know.
Well, that's why I don't have a problem with the square or the surrounding of the square. I just, I am not a big fan of, I mean, without there being some sort of commercial buffer in between industrial and residential, I think that that's a big zoning no-no to do industrial backed up right directly up to not just mixed residential, but actual houses. So,
Yeah. But on the other, I mean, you're already next to the airport and Mercy Flight. I'm just trying to think like. I don't know, you already have some commercial elements there anyway, but I guess to your point, you just want to make sure it's use the word buffer, it's buffered correctly, or as most buffered the best it can be.
Okay, well, why don't we pull together a couple iterations of the map that we can kind of further discuss and evaluate as we continue
That
discussions.
sounds good.
Okay, so the big takeaway from our June meeting regarding the industrial business park overlay was, ensure any of the guidelines, design parameters are not overly burdensome or strict. So kind of finding that appropriate balance between, design and aesthetics and just not making things too cumbersome for developers, companies that are interested in coming into and developing in the town. So again, this is our purpose statement, which is pretty straightforward. It's just supplemental regulations on top of the underlying zoning regulations. And then, as I mentioned earlier, they're broken up into building guidelines and site guidelines. So for the building piece of this, looking at, and again, based on our conversations in June, looking at these only being applicable to when a building is 200 feet or closer to the edge of the public right of way. So if you have a building that's farther back and really not even very visible from the public right of way, these guidelines or standards to be determined would not apply. Is that consistent with what other folks recollect from our discussion at the June meeting?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I think so.
Okay. So that said, that being kind of the overarching premise, we did not make any changes to the facade requirements of really kind of helping to break up a facade. But again, these would only be required for those buildings that are 200 feet or closer to the public right of way. And the same for materials. So these guidelines for materials are still incorporated, but would only apply. And then this is just additional really on materials and colors. So no more than 3 building materials on the primary facade and harmonious and compatible, but again, only applicable to those buildings within 200 feet. The materials and other architectural details like entryways and windows, no changes to the actual guidelines aside from, again, within 200 feet. And then with regards to the site design guidelines, here's where we do have a few changes. So overall building orientation was not modified. Still believe there should be a strong connection between the building entry and the primary street. Projects with multiple buildings should have pedestrian connections between structures. And then obviously accessibility and functionality is critical to the overall site design. Loading and service areas, we did remove the text you can see crossed out here that was previously incorporated regarding the fact that trailers, containers, and outbuildings cannot be used. So per our discussion at the June meeting, we've removed that. So you could have trailers, containers, and outbuildings for additional storage. For refuse storage and enclosures, so you can see the text in red. So storage and staging should be located in the rear yard and buffered to the extent practicable. So recognizing maybe there's some instances where you can't achieve that. And then for refuse, it should be within enclosures and 100% screened if visible from the public right of way. So if it is located on site in an area not visible from the public right of way, you would not then be required to ensure that it's 100% screened and enclosed. With regards to off-street parking, we've removed the requirement to locate parking in the rear of structures per our discussion in June, just recognizing sometimes that is not possible or even the best approach for some of these industrial type buildings and developments. For landscaping and buffering, we've just added some language to soften some of the parking island requirements to really encourage additional landscaping. And then the same for lighting. So lighting of pedestrian walkways instead of required, we're now saying is recommended. So again, softening that language as well. And then last topic discussed within the overlay, the design overlay is signage, and that is just in accordance with the underlying signage requirements within your zoning code. So there were no additional signage design parameters or requirements added to the design guideline overlay. So I can back up there, and again, you'll probably want to get into the meat and the details of the actual zoning language, but any big picture observations or thoughts are certainly welcome at this point.
I'm gonna jump in here again. Sorry, I feel like I'm always jumping in on these, but I'm a little bit concerned. I would be interested to understand how this proposal would affect our existing businesses. And Pactiv is a perfect example. It's the largest private employer in all of Ontario County, and their existing building is along the private right or on the public right of way. Summers Drive extends into their campus. So all of their loading containers and everything else. I think of even Artisan Meats, who has challenged the location of the building and the way it is, and the loading dock is visible from Brickyard Road. So I just don't understand how some of these regulations may impact our existing businesses. And I guess my other question is the 50 foot in terms of the wall space. In the form-based code, I thought it was 100 feet without a break. Is it 50? 50 seems awful small to me, especially for an industrial building.
It might be 100. So that's certainly something we can modify. And back to your original question, Doug, any of the existing businesses would not be impacted by the overlay. They would be considered existing non-conforming. There's also, the larger question of does the overlay get codified, which then for future developments would require meeting these thresholds, or does this not get codified and just serve as guidelines of things that you want future companies, future developers to follow, but it is not legally codified within your zoning? It's a please, we'd love if you would look at these and incorporate all of these into your development, but you're not legally required to do so.
Good question.
It is a good question. And I think with developers, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because developers want to know what can I do and what can I not do
Yeah,
versus like, well, we'd like you to do this, but you don't have to.
they're going to take the easiest route, obviously.
I think we need to make the regulations as simplistic and easy as possible in the industrial zone and then codify them. So make them the least restrictive possible when we're talking about the residential area. And then if they're not codified, it's, to Andy's point, I don't think anybody's really going to pay any attention to them, so. But I think we need to make them as low as, the least restrictive possible and the easiest for the developers to create their structures.
Well, the businesses that we already have in the area are grandfathered. What if they want to make some modification in their structure or something that is incorporated in this? How would that work?
So we could, similar to how we did with the form-based code, we could identify triggers. So if you're doing only, say, change XYZ, you wouldn't be required to conform. But if your changes are significant enough, there might be elements of this that would then require conformance. If they're expanding their building by,
Yeah.
doubling their footprint, for example.
Yeah, I think we said something like 5,000 square feet in the form-based code, or
Yeah, I think that it would be scaled up the triggers would be scaled up considerably for the industrial, so you could make it.
Yeah.
But
that kind of idea, though. That
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe just taking a step back to kind of Adeline's comments about kind of simplistic and easy, right? So, this came up as part of the Uptown Master Plan, wanting to have an additional set of design parameters for future industrial uses. I guess I'd be interested to hear from the group, what do you feel is most important to regulate that you aren't regulating today? Is it all of these topics? Do you feel it's really important to regulate certain things over other things? What do you really see as the goal of these additional regulations within these two areas of Uptown?
Well,
Can
I
you scroll
think
through the
about
pages again?
I think about Pactiv and the screening and the berming and things that they've done, and really, that is a huge facility that really doesn't have it's really not an eyesore, quite frankly.
No.
I guess I'm trying to say is maybe it's around buffering and
The
screening,
edges.
more than anything else, at least to me.
Okay.
I would
So-
agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, along that lines, I can tell you the only real comment that I hear from employees of some of those facilities is that they would love to have the walkability aspect. Be able to go for a lunch break, come out to a sidewalk or a trail or a pathway or something or other that then connects. Not necessarily on the property, but they're adjoining somewhere.
That's a great point. If we're trying to build out the rest of Uptown, we need to connect everything together, right?
Yep. So
Both of those are really good points. I agree with Andy. The buffering is really important. And the interesting thing about Pactiv is you don't see the really ugly buildings. Your eye is immediately drawn to the conservation things that they've done, the pond, the trees, the animals, etc. And that's why I think that buffering is an important element of any of the industrial area, whether it backs up to residential area or not, because people driving by see all this stuff too. And just not very attractive buildings can come across as an eyesore. And even when you're driving down North Street toward 332, that isn't, and it's a heavy industrial area, and it isn't an eyesore. It never has been an eyesore. And I support the buffering issue. I agree, though, that making the small service facilities accessible to the workers at these industrial areas is really a critical factor, without having them to get into their car and go and find parking, et cetera, or go through a fast food, God forbid. You know, we want them to be able to go into these places and provide a community type of atmosphere. And that's what I value most about this Uptown project, is the community feel that we're trying to get.
Okay. So would you be comfortable, again, going back to that, right? Don't make it overly burdensome, most impact for effort, stripping out the building components that are in here and really focusing on the site design pieces to ensure there's adequate screening and buffering, ensure there's adequate connectivity, you know, to the public right of way, and really focusing on that piece? Would that be then less arduous for future companies, right? They're making their investment on the perimeter and the edges, and are allowed to really do internally what they need to do for their business?
I would agree with that.
I think so, yeah, I think that's what makes more sense.
It's kind of the point of industrial, right? If it was something that we all really appreciated the appearance of and wanted to go to every day, it would be commercial, not industrial.
Hmm.
From the town's perspective, town leadership, board members, are you comfortable with that approach?
Yeah, certainly when you look at the list of building materials that you had outlined earlier, I don't know what else somebody would use other than that list. So that list pretty much encompasses everything. So things like that really don't need to be in here, in my opinion.
Okay.
I don't think somebody's going to build a facility that, you know, be inherently ugly and unattractive and turn people off. I mean, anybody that moves in is going to want to engage the community and be a good neighbor. So really, as you said very early in the discussion, Kimberly, it's, you know, you want to not be overly burdensome. So stripping some of the stuff out would probably be a good idea.
Okay, so let us then send you an updated document for the overlay that strips out some of the building requirements and just make sure we're kind of meeting the overarching goals that we want to meet with regards to kind of how we treat the perimeter and the landscape elements of industrial parcels.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I'm just sitting here thinking about the comments that have just been made, and I, for one, don't know what the facade is at the Pactive Distribution Center and how many doors they have, and do they have trailers or storage, and how many of us really know what's going on back there, as long as it's properly screened and buffered.
Yep.
Okay, good. This is a good discussion.
I didn't even know about their huge 96 bay docking in the back until we toured the facility as the Economic Development Committee. I mean, it's a well done facility.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And we will also make sure the language is written in a way that it will then be codified and incorporated into the zoning code. So they will be an additional layer of requirements, again, just specific to these areas within the uptown boundary and not apply to industrial areas throughout the town. But they will be a kind of one additional layer of design requirement.
Doug, where else do we have industrial areas in town?
The County Road 10 area, a lot of that is industrial going down that way.
Okay, so that gives us direction for this piece. And this my next step slide might tweak it just a little, because so we'll need a couple days just to get a revised industrial overlay to you. And then because of that, wanting to make sure we're giving you enough time to do a more detailed review. So rather than written comments by October 22nd, let's say October 27th, which would be about 2 weeks, giving people 2 weeks to get us any written comments, and those can get, I'm just gonna change it right down here so everyone's got it. So Wednesday, the 27th, those can come directly to myself or Samantha at Berkman. You should have both of our email addresses, so you can send written comments directly to our attention. And then I still think we shoot for scheduling a next meeting to review those written comments and adjustments the week of November 1st, if possible. Again, just wanting to kind of keep this discussion fresh in everyone's mind and maintain momentum as we wrap up these last two pieces. Does that sound reasonable, Oksana, to look at something that first week of November, or is that not a good week?
Yeah. Hold on, let me look at my, election day is the 2nd.
We might be busy that day.
Yes.
At least two of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we could do it the Monday if you wanted to, November 1st. Or we
It
could
might be
do,
busy leading up. What about the 4th? Would the 4th work? Thursday, the 4th?
sure, there's nothing on Thursday, the 4th that I know of.
That works for me, although I'd prefer it not at noon since there's a Rotary meeting on Thursdays that Doug might want to go to too.
Does this 10:30 time slot seem to work for folks?
Or do you want earlier? We could do 9 o'clock.
9 would be better for me.
I don't know if there's any overlap, but there is a history team meeting that morning at 9. I don't know if anybody on this committee participates in those or not.
You know what? Let me check with Sarah to see what other meetings there are on the 4th.
Okay,
And then I'll shoot you an email, okay?
okay.
But temporarily, let's do the 4th at 9 o'clock.
Can I ask a question before we close out? Are we going to work on any other issues in this committee beyond just the various plans that we're working on right now with Kimberly? Like, for example, we had brought up doing retention visits to existing businesses, for example. I was just wondering if we were planning to work on anything else.
I don't know if Oksana, if you heard that or not. Adeline was asking a question. I think, Adeline, I think some of that, this group kind of needs to have a strategic planning session to figure out kind of what it's going to do going forward from here. And then also take into account some of the other things that are already happening. You know, the county has retention visits going on also, Ontario County IDA. There's some different things going on with that. And then obviously we have our LDC and there's some variety of things going on there. So I think once we get through this project, we probably need to have a strategic session where we talk about that and kind of some next steps. Kimberly, one quick question I have, if I could real quick. As you're preparing your additional points for the overlay and the rezoning, I think one of the things that would be helpful, I know we ran into this kind of at the last minute with the form-based code, is really identifying do these zoning changes replace the mixed use overlay that currently exists? So for the form-based code, they actually did. For the area in the pinkish color and the yellow color, I know we actually stripped away the mixed use overlay in those areas. So if we could just make sure that we spell that out, whatever direction it is that we're going, that would be helpful.
I think that's probably still up for, I would say yes, it does across the board, but maybe that's an additional conversation we just need to have Doug and confirm with Shauna as well. Make sure we're all on the same page.
When does the form-based code, is it fully in effect now because the town board approved it? Okay.
Yes. Okay, so we will, Oksana, did you forward those documents this morning? I know you just got them.
I just got them and I did nothing with them. So I'm wondering,
Perfect.
should I
Don't do
wait?
anything.
Should I wait? Should I wait until you get the updates and
Yep,
send
I
them
was
to
just gonna
me?
say, yep, don't do anything with those. Delete that email and we'll send you a series of new documents.
Okay. Can we just go back to the map for the industrial?
Sure. Let me put that back up.
I just wanted to know what lands are available in that blue zone, or are they all already filled with companies? Is Doug still there?
I am. So Oksana, just kind of looking at that map quickly, it looks to me like there are maybe 3 or 4 vacant parcels on that blue area where something could be developed or something could be redeveloped. But that's about it. And the parcels that I'm seeing in the blue that are available, with the exception of the parcel that's for sale on County Road 30 across from the Civic Center, are fairly small parcels. So it would be difficult to recruit a large, a super large industrial manufacturing. I mean, like the Project Kent that was referenced, the minimum for that was 100 acres. They wouldn't even entertain anything less than 100 acres. A lot of times with manufacturing, I was even just recently having a conversation with a laser manufacturer who needed it minimal. I think it wasn't that 20 acres, Andy? Was that 15, 20 acres or something other like that?
He told me more like 6 or 8 acres, Doug.
Oh, okay. So a little smaller, but yeah.
20,
Yeah, I
20
think with
30,000
that
square
land
foot building.
across in the Civic Center, aren't there restrictions too because of the airport? Like, I guess it can't be too tall, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. Yes, there's restrictions because of the runway. Yes.
And then along the same vein, where else is our industrial land and how many acres do we have that can be developed? Does anybody have a handle on that?
So I actually had previously done a full calculation. We had 900 acres of industrial land, but that was total. And the overwhelming majority of that is consumed by Pactiv and existing businesses that are already, Pactiv is the biggest chunk. We really have very, very limited vacant industrial land available currently in the town of Canandaigua. And the whole County Road 10, Greg mentioned the whole County Road 10 area. The problem there is there's no sewer. So the chances of recruiting a developer from an industrial manufacturing perspective that they're going to run sewer, I would say that's non-existent. Because when you're talking about recruiting industrial manufacturing or these large manufacturing type entities, you're competing with other municipalities that are saying, hey, we'll put in the water sewer, we'll put in the infrastructure, we'll put in the railway, we'll put in all these different things for you. So that's certainly a challenge when it comes to an area that doesn't have sewer and it being zoned industrial.
Yeah. So in the yellow area north of the blue, what parcels are available?
What?
What happened?
She asked what parcels are available in the yellow area surrounding Thomas Road.
What parcels are available? So the two large parcels on the south side of Thomas Road are both currently farmed. They're zoned R130, and they're right there, but there's a gas line that runs through it, so there's some challenges there. So is that what? And then the parcel just to the south of that is also available. That weird shaped
Okay.
parcel.
And north of Thomas
And
Road, that's all Center Point, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the purple, my question is what we were talking about today covering the business park as well? Or we're just talking about the blue?
It covers the business park, the purple area within Uptown as well.
Okay.
Didn't somebody just buy that corner piece on Yerkes and Route 332?
Yes, the Ontario County Humane Society bought it for construction of a new Happy Tales adoption center.
Most of that's wetlands anyways, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it's I want to say 50 to 60 acres off the top of my head, but more than, I think almost half of it is wetlands. But they're from what I understand, they're proposing to construct an adoption center with trails through that property.
So it looks like we really do need more industrial land. Yeah, so Kimberly, if you can figure out a different way of doing this on the yellow, that would be great.
Yep, we'll pull together a couple different maps.
Yeah. Okay, are we done? Everyone, any other questions?
Nope.
Hello?
I'm good.
No, I think we're good.
No
Okay.
question.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right,
Okay,
thank you,
I'll let
everyone.
you know. I'll let you know about November 4th then.
Okay, and we'll be in touch shortly with some updated material to send out.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you. Have a good day,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
Bye, everybody.
You too, bye.